Welcome back to a show we're calling The World Next Year. And with us, Craig Kapitis of Quartz in the Atlantic, Christopher Dickey of Newsweek and The Daily Beast, and Penkett of The Independent, and Hamdan Mustafavi of Courrier International. Tell us again what Courrier International is.
Courrier International is a review of the best articles that are published in the international press, and it comes out every week, and we also have a website.
All right, and we were talking just before the break about China, about foreign policy, the Beijing flexing its muscle, the Chinese taking pride in a military that's spreading its wings, and when web viewers at the end of November spotted personnel on board an aircraft carrier striking a Gangnam-style pose, well, it inspired copycats throughout the nation. There you see, and what's amazing when you see this video, and Penkett, it's a Korean song that's now gotten 1 billion views on YouTube, and it's inspired the Chinese.
It's global. I mean, even Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, was seen trying not very effectively to do the Gangnam Style.
All right, but it says also a lot about how China is also a country that's changing. We were mentioning it in part one, how the new leader, Xi Jinping, has promised to crack down on corruption if he's serious. He's got his work cut out. Last June, for instance, saw a news blackout on commemorating the first anniversary of the Wenzhou high-speed rail disaster, where 40 people died because of a hastily built network where regulators reportedly took their cut. There was a big shutdown on the internet talking about it. And Craig Kapitis, the handling of that rail disaster just shows to a certain degree, even if Xi Jinping has good intentions when it comes to cracking down on corruption, will his orders be carried out below?
I would suspect that they will continue to be carried out, and the chief order is do nothing that's going to embarrass the small cadre of individuals who make up the Communist Party of China, who control the country. Having worked there for a few years, I can tell you that keeping the Communist Party in power is the main goal of the Chinese leadership. And in the way that the U.S. military views collateral damage, I believe that the Chinese view events like this as their kind of domestic collateral damage that's necessary for them to grow at a breakneck pace. I think it's going to come back home to bite them, particularly when it comes to the environmental cost of what they're doing there. The pollution in the rivers is remarkable. The sky from the smokestacks and the various factories within the cities. One wonders how long this can go on for, and it's very clear that the Chinese leadership, past, present, and I suspect future, have yet to make a decision to say, well, we're going to fix up the environment. I firmly believe that this coming year, we will see the environment emerging as a bigger issue in China, with outsiders coming to tell them, you've got to clean this mess up.
That's true, because you see, and on the websites and on the blogs, you see that's very important issue for people, because maybe they can't complain about the political structure of the country, but they can complain about the problems they deal with in their everyday life, like having polluted water or stuff like that. And I also think it's gonna, even if there's internet is blocked and things like that, still we can see that there's active internet activists, and that doesn't stop. And we'll see next year the Boxilai trial. So that's also something that provokes a lot of comments on the internet.
The Boxilai trial, we saw that the cost of labor is going up, and when there were fights, Christopher Dickey, at the Foxconn factory, where makes the components for things like iPhones, back in September, the authorities again paid very close attention to what was going on.
Well, of course they did. I mean, in fact, you have rising standards of living in China. And as you have rising standards of living, you're going to have rising wages and rising expectations. I mean, you're taking a society that's moved very quickly in 50 years from extremely low expectations to extremely high ones. And I think one of the things that you're going to see, we already see signals from the new government, even before it came in, that there's going to be a tendency toward at least some kind of symbolic austerity, where people are going to be asked to dress more conservatively. A friend of mine owns the Caruso clothing manufacturer in Italy, and they've just partnered with the biggest uniform maker in China to make men's suits that'll look a little more austere, a little less flashy. They're already pretty austere, in my opinion, but you'll also, I think, fewer luxury goods, all of that. It's going to be damped down for a while.
It's going to be damped down. The outside world, though, is rooting for more growth, like your friend, the suit maker. China's economy expected to rebound in 2013 to better than 8% growth. And Penkett, what soft landing?
What soft landing? Well, I think that is interesting because that means that they can continue their pact with the people, you know, that they can become more prosperous as long as they don't come in with political demands, because that remains totally out of the question. They can go after corruption, but they are not going to loosen their political institutions.
All right, we're going to move on to a continent where growth figures are not at 8.4% for next year. We're talking about Europe and its paymaster. In 2013, there'll be much talk of Germany's most popular politician. Angela Merkel's CDU heads to the polls in the fall. She has every chance of retaining the chancellor's post. The no-nonsense tone of the East German-born physicist earning her the nickname of Mutti. And Mommy knows how to quaff a beer when needed, but also how to show tough love, like at the party conference, where she earned 97% of the votes of the rank and file to lead the Christian Democrats in the general election.
I could say we're through the worst of the crisis, but I want to say here that we should remain cautious. It can't be said often enough that the European debt crisis cannot be solved with one magic bullet, whether it's Eurobonds or debt haircuts.
And we saw at the final EU summit of 2012, the Germans pulling their weight around a bit, and Merkel more and more imposing her will. She seemed to soften a little bit after the election of François Hollande back in May. But now it was when it came to the banking union, when it came to other such matters, Germany imposing its will at that summit.
Germany is in charge of the European Union right now for all intents and purposes until there is a European-wide election to elect a real representative government of Europe. It's very convenient for Angela Merkel to get on stage and say that we're through the worst of the crisis, unless you're still in the throes of the crisis, unless you're one of the unemployed. The
Germans don't see it that way.
No, they don't. But when you look at the leadership within Europe right now, and let's take England out of the mix because they don't want to be part of this. Who's Merkel bucking up against? You know, François Hollande, who's out of a character out of Tartuffe. The resurgence of Berlusconi in Italy, another cartoon character down there. The Prime Minister of Spain. Merkel is the strong man, strong woman of Europe. And where it's going to come down to this coming year is who's going to control the banks. Is it going to be Germany? Or is it going to be the European Central Bank? Or indeed, is the European Central Bank just a code word for Germany? I think what we're going to see this coming year, as England tries to push itself further and further away from Europe, I think you will see increased calls to actually have a real pan-European election to elect someone who actually represents this confederation of states. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I think you're going to be seeing more calls for this.
And Penkett?
Well, I agree with you, Craig, about about Merkel, but to me it's like Snow White and the 26 dwarves. She is running the show. Whether it's the European Central Bank or Germany, the answer will have to come from Germany. That is for sure. But what worries me slightly is she is cautious, Merkel. And I think that this whole euro crisis could have been sorted out a lot earlier had stronger measures been taken earlier on. And I think there was really a lack of political will from these elites in Europe who frankly were a bit patronizing with the rest of us, because we are the taxpayers who are going to have to pick up the bill for Greece and Spain and Ireland and on and on. It took too long. And I don't know what will happen in 2013, but I'm not that optimistic.
All right. But at the same time, and this is the incredible bit, polls show that even though she's finishing out her second term, Angela Merkel and the CDU have nearly 40% of the vote. There you see the graph from Spiegel on how the tracking poll. The Social Democrats stuck in the doldrums there with in the red marker, and the most amazing, of course, is the Free Democrats, which have plummeted to under 5%. Why is there inside of Germany? It's as if there is no crisis going on, Christopher Dickey.
Germany's economy is in pretty good shape, given that it's in the middle of this European crisis and is part of Europe. I mean, it's miraculously positive for many Germans as they look around. And who has been in charge of Germany as it has survived the crisis and prospered? Angela Merkel. I don't think it's hard to understand why people support that. If they were facing 10% unemployment, the way we are here in France, I doubt she'd be so popular. But they're not. And I think also she just is in tune with the unified German nation. I think it's important that she comes from the East. I think she has support in the East, but that she also understands so well the dynamism of former West Germany and works with it so effectively. I think she is a very good leader for Germany. Whether she's a good leader for Europe is a different question, but the Germans do like her, and they have reason to.
And there's no real opposition in Germany right now. Pierre Steinbrück, which was
the head of the Social Democrats.
Yeah, he was his minister for some years, so her minister for some years, and he has nothing very original to offer for a different Germany. And I think the only difference this year might be that she'll talk more about Germany and less about Europe, and try to assure her people that they will not pour more and more money into the countries that are like Greece and Italy. And I think maybe that's what the campaign is going to be about in Germany. But
I agree. Well, I think you're right. I mean, the only country that has less of an opposition than Germany is France.
Yeah,
it's quite remarkable when you look at it through that lens.
All right, Europe bashing is an easy thing to do. There was, though, a watershed moment where Europeans stepped up to the bat. It was back in July. It wasn't Angela Merkel, and it came not from a German, but from an Italian.
The ECB is ready to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro. And believe me, it will be enough.
Craig Kopidis, of course, that hasn't solved the problems in Athens, that statement by Mario Draghi, the head of the European Central Bank, but it did calm the markets quite a bit.
It did. Draghi's statement is curious in that in this process that Europe's been going through, kicking the can down the road, this is the best kick so far. He really booted it down the highway, and it gives people some breathing space until the next time it comes to kick the can down the road. You cannot get away from the reality of Europe is that you have a lot of leaders, the dwarves, as I think you aptly describe them, scrambling around trying to figure out how to keep this confederation and its currency together without actually having a real democratic institution to support it. And that I see again is the issue going forward.
The issue going forward. Now, with 2013 filled, as you've seen, with so many uncertainties, what perhaps you need is a bit of light reading to help us get through it. Anne Penkett, what is your choice for the coming year?
My light reading is 400 pages long. It's called Why Nations Fail, The Origins of Power, Prosperity and Poverty. And that's written by two economists, a guy from Harvard and a guy from MIT. It has all the answers to all of our questions. It talks about China, it talks about Somalia, it talks about Egypt. And basically, it sets... These guys have been working 15 years doing the research on this book. And they conclude that you really need three conditions to keep states, to prevent them from failing. One is to get rid of the elites in what they call extractive institutions. These are institutions which extract resources from the populations. So get rid of those. And in their place, you need to put inclusive political institutions. And you also need, according to their work, a degree of centralized government.
And very briefly, the third one?
That was the third.
That was the third.
Get rid of extractive, bring in inclusive, and have some centralized government.
All right. Christopher Dickey, your reading?
Oh, I always go back to a book called A Peace to End All Peace by David Fromkin that came out, I don't know, more than 20 years ago. But it's about the way the European powers drew all those lines in the sand that became the borders of the Middle East after World War I with the breakup of the Ottoman Empire. And basically, it shows you why it is that those countries, almost all the countries in the Middle East, have been so fragile and so untenable and have had this crisis of legitimacy. They were foreign creations, and they are still waiting to become the creations of the people that live in them.
Perhaps lessons from that to be drawn for Africa as well, where some of the borders are artificial. Craig Kapitas?
A Bright and Shining Lie by Neil Sheehan, written back in 1988. One of the greatest books ever written. It's the story of folly. It's a parable for what's going on today. It's a book that whose main character had the ability to convince people of things that were not real.
In Vietnam.
In Vietnam, and the consequences of what happens when you can convince people of things which are not real.
Hamdan Mustafavi, you brought a novel.
Yeah, I brought a novel which is Croc Attack by Asaf Gavron, which is an Israeli author. It's his only novel translated in French and English, and it won the Korean International Prize, book prize.
Best foreign book.
Yeah, best foreign book this year, and it tells the story of a Palestinian bomber and of an Israeli living in Tel Aviv who escaped a bombing, and it tells their stories and together, and it's very interesting because you see that these two characters are very similar and they could in some way understand each other, but they have such an ideology that they can't, that prevents them from coming together, and it's
what binds them and what separates them.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there. And I want to thank you, Hamdan Mustafavi, Christopher Dickey, Anne Penkett, and also Craig Kapitas. Thank you for being with us, and a Happy New Year to all here from all of us at France 24.